First, China's change to the way, hang on, I'm talking about China. China, right, it's first banned our beef from 4 abattoirs. And this week it killed off our barley exports too. Now, that was almost certainly to punish us for asking for an independent inquiry into how this virus started. Now, most of this is, I think, just punishment. And I think everyone knows that. But this week, of all weeks, China also said, hello, we're going to change the way that we look at your iron ore exports. Now, this is big because our iron ore exports are very, very important. The thing is, this could actually give it an excuse as to why it might just stop some of our exports coming in. Hello, we found a problem, your exports of our iron ore can't come in. Now, they've been dressed up by the government, our government, and by iron ore exporters as actually, this is positive. This is positive, it's streamlining, it's what we always ask for, and this is perfectly good. But China's official Global Times newspaper quoted a Chinese academic on these changes saying, this is another implicit warning to Australia. And in another article, the Global Times went on to abuse us, calling us a giant kangaroo that serves as the dog of the US, and warning that we will hit a deadlock with China on trade disputes. So, I don't know, you can call it a coincidence or whatever, we'll see. Meanwhile, Victoria. Why is Victoria such a problem state at the moment in so many ways? Ideologically crazy. Victoria, meanwhile, is getting much closer to this very same Chinese dictatorship. Alone in the country, its premier, Daniel Andrews, is signing up to China's Belt and Road Initiative, which China is using to secure its supplies and spread its influence. This Belt and Roads agreement with Victoria commits the governments of both sides, that's Victoria and this dictatorship, to strengthen coordination and guidance as well as policy support to ensure long-term and sustainable cooperation and to stick to all-round cooperation. Now, with Victoria going so deep into debt, it will need investment, including Chinese investment, more than ever. But when Transport Infrastructure Minister Jacinta Allen was asked this week by Parliamentary Committee just how much Chinese cash she was counting on to fund a massive projects now that Victoria's got no money, how much of it was likely to come from these arrangements with the Chinese government, she refused to answer. Just like a Chinese autocrat, she claimed not just that the question was overstepping the terms of reference for that inquiry, but that it overstepped the bounds of any sort of decent public discussion. Unbelievable. This is a minister saying it's not decent to tell taxpayers how much the government is borrowing from China. Well, at the risk of asking an indecent question about this, I will discuss this with Richard McGregor, who for years was a distinguished foreign correspondent in Beijing, now with the Lowy Institute. He's also the author of a book on President Xi Jinping, The Backlash, that I've recommended before, and I do that because I think it's actually extremely insightful, The Backlash. Richard McGregor, thank you so much for your time. First, China's changed the way it checks iron ore coming into the country. Look, you've got the Morrison government saying this was in the works, could actually streamline things, it could be useful, and yet at the same time in the Global Times, China's Global Times, it says this is a warning to us. How do you read it?
Andrew, I would be very surprised if China interrupted iron ore imports into the country at all. You know, in fact, I think they have been very impressed by the way Australian miners have managed to keep their mines going, their workforce safe and healthy throughout this, because otherwise they'd be struggling to get the commodity because of massive problems in our main competitor, Brazil. What you see in the Global Times, I just reckon they like giving us a little bit of a needle. They like to keep us off balance. They like to keep thinking there's more sanctions coming. So touch wood, I'd be shocked if anything happened in the short term with iron ore.
Meanwhile, let's go to Victoria then. Victoria is doing what the federal government refuses on security grounds. It's signing up to the Belt and Road Initiative of China. Can you first tell us, what does China actually want broadly from this initiative? What's it all about?
Well, Belt and Road is basically a grand geopolitical initiative from China to spread its influence, spread its technology, anchor Chinese technology standards, sell goods, build power stations, find a way to employ get business for their companies overseas, and to be fair, grow the economies in their hinterlands. We're talking about through the Kazakhstans of this world, through Pakistan, all the way to Europe. So it's a economic and geopolitical initiative. I wouldn't call it a Marshall Plan, because the Marshall Plan came after the war, but some Chinese compare it to that. So it's a way to entrench China in these countries and to eclipse the US.
Well, given that, is it smart for Victoria to sign up?
I don't know that there's anything sinister about what Victoria did, but I'll tell you what my objection to that is. And it's kind of freelancing on foreign policy. I mean, we're a democracy. Everybody can have their opinion. State governments can differ with the federal government. But it's a basic question of reciprocity. There's absolutely no way that a Chinese province could take a policy and do a deal with the Australian federal government in contravention with national policy. And I think that's pretty unhealthy for Australia, particularly when China is such a sensitive issue which has to be very properly and firmly managed. It's not good to have state governments going off and making agreements like this.
Well, that's one issue, okay. That's the national security part of it that you're talking about. What about the other issue, that is it smart to be out there trying to get even more investment from China right now, when I would have thought that this coronavirus crisis has already shown us that we're too dependent, too exposed, too dependent on China already?
Yeah, there's differing views on that. I mean, I'm a bit of a heretic maybe on your program. I'm very much in favour of foreign investment. I mean, but there is the point about overdependence, over-reliance on China, and the fact that that may give us, may give them leverage over us, and certainly we have to worry about that. I don't know exactly what Victoria is hoping to get out of this. I mean, I don't think they'll get cheap money from China. That era is drying up anyway, and why would they give a developed country cheap loans? They would do that in a developing country. I don't know whether they'll get any particular extra investment if that's what they want. They certainly won't be bringing Chinese labour into Victoria, as many countries have done under the Belt and Road Initiative. That's not allowed under, I think, our laws, and of course the people of Victoria would object to it. So it's very much a symbolic victory for China, and it's not clear to me let alone what Australia gets out of it, but what Victoria gets out of it.
Well, I saw what China got out of it. It got the Victorian Premier, Tim Pallas, siding with China in our dispute over the exports of beef and barley that China's disrupted. So it's already getting some reward out of this. Meanwhile, China, look, maybe I'm being suspicious here, Richard, but it seems to me that China is counting on the distraction that's been caused by this virus to increase its power over Hong Kong, the former British colony, where we last year saw those huge democracy protests. Now, pro-China politicians now look like trying to ram through a new national security law that bans treason, sedition, secession. You can understand why pro-democracy legislators are really upset about this. How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, Andrew, it's your job to be suspicious, and on occasions I'll calm you down, but on this occasion I won't. I think it's a very serious moment in Hong Kong right now with the one country, two systems project. What is happening is that Beijing has decided in recent months, they put very much a hardliner in charge of Hong Kong policy. They've said that they don't have to comply with the basic law, which is Hong Kong's mini constitution, which was agreed between the UK and China with the handover in 1997. Beijing is going to have a new national security law which will cover Hong Kong, and that should go through the Hong Kong Parliament, the Legislative Assembly. But China is basically going to promulgate it and just put it there. So if that goes ahead, it's going to be a spark for more and bigger protests, and it really does spell the proper end of one country, two systems. So it's a pretty big deal, I think.
Well, that really alarms me because we were both foreign correspondents in Hong Kong. I really like that place. It's very special. But if this goes that way, oh my God, what a tragedy. And I think, well, we'll see a lot of trouble there as we saw last year. That'll be nothing. Richard McGregor, thank you so much for that warning.
Thank you very much, Andrew.